From the very first days of his life, Ibrahim Traoré's story was never meant to be ordinary. Born in a land that struggled with poverty, injustice, and the shadow of foreign influence, he grew up with eyes wide open to the suffering of his people. He saw children with no shoes, mothers with no food for their families, and villages where hope seemed like a distant dream. And yet, in the middle of this hardship, he believed in something bigger. He believed that every great change in history was written by ordinary men and women who refused to give up. As a young boy, he would sit outside at night, staring at the stars in the sky. The world looked so wide, so endless, and he would whisper to himself, "One day, I will do something for my people. One day, they will not suffer like this." Those weren't just dreams of a child. They were the seeds of determination, the kind of fire that grows silently until the world feels its heat. When most boys were thinking about toys or games, Ibrahim was thinking about books, about knowledge, about discipline. He wanted to understand not only the history of his country, but also the mistakes that had been made. He wanted to learn why Africa, a land so rich in gold, oil, and resources, was still trapped in poverty, and the more he learned, the stronger his conviction became. It is not enough to complain. If I want change, I must become the change. That belief pushed him toward the military. It wasn't an easy choice. The army is a place of hardship, of strict rules, of sacrifice. But Ibrahim knew that discipline forges leaders, and leaders shape nations. When he first wore the uniform, he felt the weight of responsibility. It wasn't just cloth on his back. It was the symbol of service, of protection, of loyalty to the people who had no voice. Day after day, he trained harder than the rest. While others gave up in exhaustion, he stayed back, pushing his limits. In the silence of the night, when his fellow soldiers slept, he sharpened his mind like a sword. He read books about strategy, leadership, and the stories of those who had fought for freedom across the world. He studied Che Guevara, Thomas Sankara, Nelson Mandela. He whispered to himself, "If they could fight, why can't I? If they could rise, why can't my people?" But make no mistake, his journey was not easy. He faced resistance, doubts, and even betrayal. Some told him, "You are too young. You cannot lead. Change will never happen here." Every word of doubt was like a stone thrown at his dream. Yet Ibrahim knew that diamonds are only formed under pressure, and so every insult, every doubt, every moment of rejection only carved his determination deeper. He rose through the ranks, not because of privilege, not because of power, but because of hard work and courage. He earned the respect of his comrades by standing with them, sweating with them, suffering with them. Leadership, he knew, was not about commanding from above. It was about walking through the fire with your people. And then came the moment of destiny. His country stood at the edge of chaos. Corruption spread like a disease. Leaders bowed their heads to foreign powers while their own citizens cried out in hunger. Soldiers and civilians alike whispered, "We need someone who will fight for us, someone unafraid, someone who belongs to us." In that moment, Ibrahim did not hesitate. He stood tall, with nothing but his courage and his faith. And he said to himself, "If no one else will rise, then I will. If no one else will fight, then I must." When he took the bold step to lead, he knew the risks. He knew that standing against injustice meant making enemies. He knew it meant sleepless nights, threats, and even danger to his own life. But he also knew one truth: the fear of death is nothing compared to the fear of living without freedom. The day he stepped forward, the young soldier became the youngest leader of his nation. Crowds filled the streets, chanting his name, not because he promised wealth or power, but because he promised dignity. He promised courage. He promised that for once, the people of Burkina Faso would stand on their own feet. And here is where the story becomes bigger than Ibrahim Traoré. Because his rise is not just his story. It is the story of every young person who feels too small to make a difference. Every poor child who feels invisible. Every ordinary soul who thinks change is impossible. He proved with his life that greatness is not reserved for the rich, the powerful, or the chosen few. Greatness belongs to those who dare to believe when no one else will. So if you are listening to this story, ask yourself, what is the fire inside you? What dream keeps you awake at night? What injustice makes your heart burn? Because Ibrahim's journey is a reminder that one voice can shake an empire, one heart can light a revolution, and one ordinary person can rise to lead a nation. This is only the beginning. Because the true test of leadership is not in the victory, it is in the struggle, the sacrifice, the nights when no one is watching but you still fight, you still believe, you still hold on. And that is the spirit that carried Ibrahim forward through storms, through resistance, through the darkness of doubt, into the light of history. But leadership, real leadership, is never about a single moment. It is not about one speech, or one victory, or one announcement. It is about what comes after. The weight of decisions, the burden of sacrifice, and the constant test of standing true to your promises. Ibrahim knew this very well. When the celebrations ended, when the chants in the streets grew quiet, the real journey began. And it was harder than anything he had ever faced before. Every morning he woke up, not as a soldier anymore, but as the leader of a nation. On his desk were reports of hunger, corruption, and threats from enemies both inside and outside the country. The pressure was heavy, but he reminded himself, pressure creates leaders. Fear destroys them. I must not break. He walked among his people, not hiding behind walls or luxury. He wanted them to see that he was not above them. He was one of them. When a farmer shook his hand, he listened. When a mother cried about the price of food, he remembered her face. When a young boy asked why the future seemed so uncertain, Ibrahim put his hand on the boy's shoulder and said, "The future belongs to you, and I will fight until it shines." The young leader's courage began to inspire more than just his country. Across Africa, across the world, people began to notice. They saw a man too young, too underestimated, rising with strength that could not be ignored. They saw in him the spirit of Thomas Sankara reborn, the courage of a lion in the body of a soldier, and they whispered, "If he can rise, then maybe we can too." But courage attracts enemies. His voice of independence threatened those who fed on Africa's weakness. Powers who wanted control over his land, his gold, his people, they watched him with anger. They said, "He is too bold. He is too dangerous." They tried to break him with lies, with pressure, with threats. Yet Ibrahim did not bend. He stood tall in every meeting, every conference, and every negotiation. He looked into the eyes of powerful men who expected him to bow, and instead he said, "We are not your slaves. We are not your property. Burkina Faso belongs to its people, and no one else." That single statement shook the world. Some called him reckless, others called him brave. But in the hearts of his people, he was a warrior, a shield, a voice that finally spoke what they had long been too afraid to say. He reminded his soldiers that their uniforms were not for decoration, but for duty. He reminded his youth that their dreams were weapons more powerful than any gun. And he reminded himself, in the quiet of night, that true power is not measured by wealth or titles, but by the courage to serve without fear. Still, the challenges were endless. The economy was weak, enemies plotted in the shadows, and every mistake was magnified by those who wanted him gone. Some nights, alone in his room, he stared at the ceiling and asked himself, "Am I enough? Can I really carry this burden? What if I fail?" But then he remembered his childhood, the faces of hungry children, the voices of his people chanting in the streets, the promises he had made, and he whispered back to himself, "I cannot fail. Even if I fall, I must fall fighting. For if I give up, then every child who ever believed in me will lose hope." And so, with every sunrise, he stood again. With every challenge, he grew stronger. He reminded his people that a leader's strength comes not from himself, but from the unity of his nation. He said, "If I am one, they can break me. But if we are millions, they cannot." This is the heart of Ibrahim Traoré's story. It is not a fairy tale of easy victories. It is the story of a man walking through fire, stumbling but not stopping, bleeding but not breaking, doubted but not defeated. And that is why his life is more than history. It is motivation. It is a call to every soul listening. Do not let fear silence you. Do not let doubt stop you. Do not let the world convince you that you are too small to matter. Because Ibrahim was once a boy with nothing but a dream, and that dream has become a flame lighting up a nation. Imagine what your dream could do if you dared to chase it with the same fire.